Welcome to the Bowden Blitz SEC edition. I'm Joe Lisi, joined by former National Coach of the Year, Terry Bowden. Coach, the 2025 season is in the books. It's been 3 straight years that the SEC has been held out of a national championship. Give me your thoughts about the conference overall this year, and can, in fact, they challenge for a national championship in 2026?
Well, they've got to fill in the bits that weren't there. Everybody had a blemish. Everybody had something they didn't do well enough, where they weren't quite at that national championship strength, including Georgia. With everything they did in their improved play, they did not quite have the defense and the pressure and the front that they've had in the past in the type of football. And so I think everybody in the SEC needs to, the top teams especially, like Georgia, Texas, Alabama, each team needs to sit back and look what specific area were we not where we needed to be, and each of the teams in the SEC is a little bit off of when they won championships. And I think that's what you got to see. That's what's got to happen from what they got out of the portal and then what they accomplished in spring football. And it's not easy. I'll say that it's not easy, because you look at all the teams that can be very good in the SEC. And with the portal and with NIL, how quickly somebody else can jump up and be hard to beat.
Absolutely. I think, too, when you look at the SEC as a whole, Coach, I mean, the biggest thing is that the SEC used to win in the trenches. The ability to recruit elite talent from an offensive line and defensive line perspective was almost NFL-esque, almost for each and every dominant team within the conference. And we're now seeing a conference like the Big Ten and others potentially step up and have just as much productivity and be able to recruit those elite talent on both sides of the football in the trenches. Teams like Texas Tech and some of the others that we saw in the college football playoff. So I think that's where my assessment of the conference takes a minor step back, because maybe they're not getting all of the 5 stars. They're starting to lose them to other conferences like the Big 12 and the Big 10, respectively.
Well, the separation from the teams that never could quite get there, that middle to lower level in the conference, now that you have a portal transfer, they don't just look at high school kids. They can see, each team can see their immediate needs, especially in the trenches on offense and defensive line. And they've got over 100 schools at Group of 5, the maybe 75 Group of 5 schools, and even 1AA schools, to look at every single program to see if there's an older person that just got missed when he came out of high school, and now is ready to help him. So all of a sudden, you're finding these teams like a Mississippi State or a Vandy or a Missouri, a South Carolina. Normally, they didn't have the talent across the front that you saw in the major 4 or 5 programs. But with the portal and being able to look at everybody in the country, I think there's ability to fill in those gaps pretty quickly.
Yeah, we'll take a look right now. Let's look at Kirby Smart and Georgia. They're already, Coach, an 8-1 shot to potentially win a national championship in 2026. We think Kirby is one of the best head coaches in college football, a defensive-minded head coach, but we talk about physicality, the ability to coach up not just defensive talent, but talent within the trenches. Your thoughts about what happened with the Bulldogs this year? Can Kirby and this team get back to prominence in the conference? They've won back-to-back championships in the SEC for the first time since 1982. Thoughts about the 26 season? Is Gunnar Stockton and that offense elite enough to win a national championship?
I think Gunnar Stockton is. I mean, he sure fits the mold of the quarterbacks that Georgia had when they won 2 national championships already. And I think the question is going to be, when you're going to try to win like Georgia does, running the football, power running, not quarterback scrambles and things like that, but power running, great defensive front. You've got to have those big people that can play. You've got to have good physical up front, and you got to win a lot of one-on-one battles, a guard against a defensive guard, a tight end versus a defensive end. You've got to be better in a lot of positions. That's their way of playing. Run the football with power, play great defense. Got to get that front with people that can put pressure on that quarterback, and a lot more tackles for loss, create negative plays, force people to play behind the chains. I don't think they quite were at that level as they were. And I've said it before, they had a real nice tight ends this year, but they play best when they've got a superstar that they can feature at tight end, because that's the kind of a guy that really goes well with Bobo, their offensive coordinator, and their offensive style is that big body tight end that they can get the ball to.
Yeah, you talk about just about 3 years ago, they lost Brock Bowers, one of the most dynamic tight ends in college football. Main reason why they were able to win national championships during his tenure in Athens. And you talk about Delp, and you talk about Lawson Lucky as well. Two tight ends that are adequate, but haven't stepped up to really close the gap to where Brock Bowers was. Brock Bowers did lead the team for multiple years on the roster. Talk to me about when you just think about Kirby's ability to recruit. That has to be the biggest thing as well, is that when we look at Lane and we look at LSU and some of the other teams that he's going to have to compete against, we have enough confidence in Kirby to get it right? He is, I want to say, a disciple of Nick. He's in that mold, and even though we think Cignetti now is following in that footsteps, Kirby Smart has won 2 national championships already. It's just that the Bulldogs defensively haven't been as elite as that team that won against Alabama just about 3 years ago.
And I'll say this, Kirby Smart's got to prove that he has the right formula with the portal in NIL. Nick Saban retired before he had to deal with it. Nick is, and Kirby is him and Dabo are a little bit alike, as they would rather build their team out of the high school ranks. I think Georgia has been a little bit more into the portal than Clemson was, but their success, their strength can be their weakness. I think the biggest thing that Kirby, and I'll throw Dabo in that category, although he's in the ACC, we know the similar type of programs. They've got to find the best way to utilize the portal. Lane Kiffin is kind of being a little bit out there on the edge, a little bit new. He's kind of trying new things. He's not afraid to step outside the box. I think they've got to look and see what he has done, what Kurt Cignetti has done, and say, you know what, maybe just because I've got the state of Georgia, I've got great high school football, I get all the ones I want, I may need to do a better job of going out around the country. And even Ohio State shows you how to do that a little bit better. And get the premier player at every position, even if that's going to put a guy on the bench that you've had in your program for 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, it will, and we'll see how the Bulldogs fare. Like I mentioned, an 8-1 shot to potentially win a national championship in 2026. Coach, I want to talk about Lane Kiffin. 9.5 win total with LSU. Expectation is through the roof. You got rid of Brian Kelly. You're paying him $91 million over 7 years. Lane Kiffin better get to 10 wins in year number 1.
Yeah, I know, and he needs to. He better. But I kind of think he will. I think when he brings Charlie Weiss with him and they keep their coordinator Blake at LSU, and he brings in the portal, I think he's got, in many eyes, the number 1 portal class of anybody in the country this year. I think he kind of fits that role right there. I think you'll get them turned around pretty quick. Now, that doesn't mean you're going to win the SEC, and that doesn't mean you're going to win the national championship. Just look at Kalen DeBoer. He hadn't done that yet, and they're saying, are you good enough to be here? And so Lane could very well fall into that category of, hey, that ain't good enough here. We're not paying you to come in second. We're paying you to come in first, and that's SEC first or national championship. Everything else is not good enough.
We'll see exactly how Lane Kiffin fares in year number 1 when we come back. We'll turn our sights to Tuscaloosa. Can Kalen DeBoer get Alabama back to prominence? We'll talk about that coming up next. All right, back on the Bowden Blitz. Joe Lisi and Coach Bowden taking a look at the teams in the SEC for 2026. We left off talking about LSU and Lane Kiffin. Also took a look at Kirby Smart and Georgia. Alabama and Kalen DeBoer, coach, have the bullseye on their back this year. Back-to-back 4-loss seasons. Ty Simpson now declaring for the NFL draft. Can Alabama get back to prominence in 2026? And is Kalen DeBoer the right guy for the job?
Well, I mean, it's almost like, yes, they have to get back, or he isn't the right guy for the job. There's no learning on the job, kind of a gradual getting ready for that job. You've got to do it now. And the problem that he's got, and I think he's got to address it, is that they have gotten the label that they're soft, and that's their own fan base. And after that debacle against Indiana, where they just got, I mean, Indiana looked like Alabama ripping through them in the playoffs. That he's got to solve that problem, and it has to start in spring football practice. They have got to decide they're going to become a physical running football team, and they're going to say, I mean, guard, tackle, centered, ends, backs, go after people and get that established. You can't decide halfway through the season that we're not quite good enough. We're going to move to a running it. You've got to get that done when you can scrimmage in the offseason with the type of recruits you get in and get a very, very physical game offensively. Because that's the one thing that Alabama prides itself, that they're going to out-physical whoever they played. That's their tradition. That goes back long before Nick Saban, Bear Bryant, all those years that you're going to get your fanny knocked off. And I know I coached against them 5 times, and every battle was a battle because they come after you. I think DeBoer has to do that. You know, being from the West Coast, Alabama, I don't want to say they're arrogant or snobby, but their brand of football, they don't believe the West Coast plays their brand of football. So he's behind the 8 ball to start with, you know, and they don't believe they play the same style at Oregon or Washington that they play in Alabama. So it's not so much that that's a true statement, but what is true is you better run the football and you better run with power. I think that's what he's got to do. So he's got to win, and it's the way he's got to win, and it's got to start this year.
Yeah, you think Alabama, you think physicality, you think Derrick Henry,
Right.
you think obviously some of the dominant running backs and just skilled talent for Nick Saban. And not only that, you think on the flip side, just dominant defensive talent that's able to run sideline to sideline. Players like Will Anderson, Reuben Foster, just dominant defensive players, especially in the front seven. And I didn't see that last year. You're right. They had one of the worst rushing offenses pre-Nick Saban. They averaged less than 4 yards per carry, multiple games. They were held under 100 yards rushing. If you think of Alabama football, that is not the MO. And I think it sort of goes hand in hand. You know, you could take a look at Kurt Cignetti, a coach that maybe won at lesser programs, and he goes to Indiana where the expectation wasn't through the roof, right? But on the flip side, Kalen DeBoer won at Fresno State, won at Washington, then made the jump to one of the best programs in college football, following a head coach that had 6 national championships in Tuscaloosa. It's almost like big bright lights, big city. He couldn't live up to the hype in the first couple of seasons.
And he didn't coach badly. And I think people have lined his win-loss record up in his first 2 years compared to a lot of other coaches and the success they had in the first 2 years. He's not far off. It's just how you win and how you don't win and how your season ended up. And again, I throw that word soft out there, and how you play. It's very important that you win in the way that they expect you to win. And that goes back a long way in their history. But you know what? And it doesn't take very long to get out of that. Think of all the great running backs at Southern Cal. Remember when they were tailback U? I mean, we go all the way to Charles White and Simpson and all the great tailbacks that they had. They've lost that kind of thing, you know. And I think Alabama, but they can live without it there. But Alabama cannot live without it. So I think he's got to go out there and make sure that's the mindset. And that's the biggest thing. It's got to be the mindset. This is what we're going to do, and we're not going to take no for an answer. And defensively as well. They've got to play that kind of relentless, aggressive, defensive people that are just hungry to get to the ball. They get there in a bad mood and all those old sayings. They've got to start doing that in the spring. You can't do it in the fall if you didn't get accomplished in the spring.
I want to ask, do you think it's a tougher sell now with NIL to recruit at Alabama? And the reason why I say that is, let's say pre-NIL with Nick there, right? The mentality and the recruiting pitch was, you come to Alabama, you're going to practice against NFL talent, and we're going to get you to the league as a number one first-round draft pick, right? Offensively or defensively, it didn't matter. You were challenging guys, Jalen Waddle, Devontae Smith, and all the elite wideouts that Alabama's had, right? And on the defensive side. But now with NIL, that luster is no longer there. They're 2 years removed, 3 years removed from a national championship. I mean, the last time they won it was in 2020, which was the COVID year. That is gone now, right? Do you feel it's a tougher sell, especially when you see teams like Texas Tech throwing money at these guys?
There's no doubt about it. I mean, there has been money. There's been money paid to players under the table forever in college football, and that was usually so those players wouldn't look around to the teams that had all the facilities, that had all the trophies in their trophy case, that had all the tradition. Because Alabama got great players because they prepared them for the NFL, and in the meantime, they let you fight for a championship too. The two things most great players want. We want to get ready for the NFL, best chance, and then we want to play for championships. Nick Saban gave them that, and that's why they went there. Now they want to see how much money they're going to make. I think that's the difference. That's where they have to face is other schools like Texas Tech. Ole Miss is getting players that they would have never got. They would have gone to Alabama, Georgia, LSU. Now Ole Miss sitting out there giving good money, and players are saying, I don't want to see your trophy case. I don't have to play for a championship. I want that money's got to come in my pocket first, and that's what talks. First of all, Alabama's also got to play that game.
The new college football, when Coach and I return, we'll take a look at Ole Miss and Pete Golding. Can they repeat and get back potentially to a college football playoff? And we'll take a look at Josh Heupel and Tennessee. Disappointing 2025 campaign. Can they get back to the college football playoff? We'll talk about it coming up next. All right, back on the Bowden Blitz, Joe Lisi and Coach Bowden previewing the 2026 season in the SEC. Left off talking about Kalen DeBoer and Alabama. We'll turn our attention to Oxford and Pete Golding. Pete Golding and Ole Miss on an interim staff and basis won 2 playoff games. They knocked off Tulane, knocked off Georgia, and went head-to-head with top-ranked Miami. Coach, can the Rebels get back to the college football playoff without possibly Trinidad Chambliss at the helm?
Well, they did exceptionally well in the portal. I think they're ranked number 2 in many rankings as far as having the best portal class in the country. But I think the most important position that Golding has to fill is the offensive coordinator position. Because so much about their success was about how Charlie Weiss ran that offense after Lane Kiffin was gone. After he was not on the sideline looking at that play sheet. I think it was Charlie Weiss calling the plays all the time anyway, and he did a great job with it. And that's going to be very important because a great part of their success at Ole Miss was the explosiveness of their offense, the way they could run and pass, the way they could score with big plays, the excitement of their offense was a big part of their image of who they are. So that's critical for them. They've got an outstanding quarterback out of Auburn and Deuce Knight, great dual threat. They've got to get a coach that can take a dual threat quarterback and use him a little bit more. Chambliss could run, but he wasn't what I would call a dual threat where they had design running plays that often with him. I thought he was just a great thrower and quarterback that could also scramble. And so I think that's going to be important. If they do, Ole Miss very well could get back into the playoff picture because of how well they did in the playoffs without Lane Kiffin and the players that they've gotten out of the portal to continue to have an outstanding football team.
Yeah, we'll see exactly the type of talent. We'll talk about Deuce Knight throughout the offseason, see if he can live up to the hype. Definitely put up some numbers against an FCS opponent. With Auburn, he can run, he can throw. He's a big kid, 6'4", about 225 pounds. That carries, especially in the conference, especially if you pair him with the right offensive coordinator, to your point. Let's take a look at Josh Heupel in Tennessee. Coach, back in 22 with Hendon Hooker, they were an 11-2 football team. They had one of the most explosive offenses in college football. They were able to sneak into the college football playoff last year with Nico. They lost to top-ranked Ohio State. This year, they had possibly a better quarterback in Joey Aguilar, but they limped to an 8-5 overall campaign. Very disappointing season, capped off with a bowl loss to Brett Bielema and Illinois.
I think what we don't remember, when they had that unbelievable offense in 22 and they could score from anywhere on the field. I know I was one of the coaches that wanted to study what they did and try to copy some of the incredible offensive things they were doing, but they had a great defense too. They could get after you on defense, one of the top defenses in the country. At Tennessee, with all the resources you've got, they've got to understand they've got to be a top 5, 10 team in the country on both sides of the football. Josh Heupel, who comes from an offensive background, has got to show he's interested in fixing that defense and making sure they're that good too. So Joey Aguilar was an outstanding quarterback from Appalachian State. I coached against him when I was at ULM. But is he one of the elite in the country? Is he one of the elite quarterbacks like a Mendoza or some of these others? That I don't know. I think they've got to make sure, because of what they want to do offensively, that they have an elite quarterback and elite football players at their school because of all the resources they've got.
And you think about Tennessee, Coach, do you feel like they're slipping a little because we see LSU, we see Ole Miss? Tennessee, last national championship, right, 1998 with Phil Fulmer. You look at this program, are they still on the elite level? This is a program that made it to the national championship last year, but I don't hear a lot of hype or media, building up Josh Heupel in Tennessee this year.
Yeah, there's no buzz. There's no buzz coming out of Tennessee. And again, Lane Kiffin, give him credit. Wherever he is, there's buzz. There's excitement. There's a lot going on. You just don't sense anything special happening at Tennessee. And they need to get that fire, that adrenaline going back up there. This is a big year for Josh Heupel, because they're going to quickly become a team that nobody's really interested in, that are not pushing. And Tennessee's not that kind of program. The best stadium, biggest stadium, great facilities, a lot of money. They've got everything. They've got tradition. They've got to go back and make sure they've got the best players that they can have to compete in the conference for the conference championship.
For Coach Bowden, I'm Joe Lisi. We'll see you next time on the Bowden Blitz.